Caroline Zickgraf is a migration specialist and the deputy director at the Hugo Observatory at the University of Liège. She joins me now from Brussels. Thanks so much for joining us. First, if you can, help us understand exactly what the world is really up against. We just heard there are 143 million climate refugees expected over 30 years just from Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. And then at the same time, we have governments around the world looking to stop immigration and even building walls. So what is supposed to happen to climate refugees?
Yes, absolutely. Climate change and migration are two of the biggest challenges facing the world in the 21st century. And when those two things collide, unfortunately, they don't collide when it comes to policy. So we're seeing little to no climate action in terms of mitigation or adaptation. And we're also seeing these really restrictive border policies. And those things just don't align. We can't have walls without addressing the need to migrate. So having restrictions doesn't actually make people any less likely to move. And 143 million people just in those regions, just internally. And it also, we're already having millions of people displaced now. We have 17.2 million people displaced by natural disasters in 2018.
Right. And I mean, we're mostly now referring to kind of international migration where they're facing these border walls and strict policy. But when we look at Australia, we're talking about internal immigration, or migration, I should say. And, you know, over the course of history, really, people have migrated constantly. We have entire civilizations that were lost, where we know masses of people once inhabited but had to go somewhere else because of drought and flooding. The difference is today we have billions more people on the planet. I mean, that's rather frightening.
Yes, we have billions of people and we're looking at massive landmass reduction, but we're also looking at the loss of complete countries, and that's something we really haven't faced before. So while indeed most migration is internal, partially because people can't afford to migrate farther, there will be international migration because there will be countries that disappear and they have no other choice but to go to other countries. And that's something we have to prepare for and have to consider in these international migration policies.
I think though, Caroline, I mean, humanity really has gotten a bit complacent because, you know, over the years, we've been able to kind of engineer our way around the harshest climates, around the harshest geography. I mean, we've got millions of people living in 52-degree deserts with no fresh water sources. And it gives you the feeling that dealing with climate change might not be that hard to handle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is this kind of blind faith in technological progress, but particularly in the industrialized world. This idea we don't really have to change anything and it'll all be fine. Solutions will be found. But the thing is, we do have solutions and we're not using them. So this is a need not for technological solutions, but for political solutions. And just because we've survived in the past doesn't mean that that can continue without us changing anything. We can't go on with a business as usual approach. People are already suffering and no one seems to be doing much about it.
What do you fear most? What do you envision as kind of the worst case scenario if all remains the same?
My worst fear is not that people migrate. My worst fear is that people aren't able to migrate. And I think that oftentimes when people talk of climate migrants or climate refugees, it's considered that that's the worst thing that can happen. And while displacement is absolutely something we want to address and avoid whenever possible, we have to see that migration is part of the solution. And if we leave people where they are, if we don't help people to move preemptively in safe conditions, the biggest fear is that people die. And immobile people are often the most vulnerable people to climate change because they are the poorest, the least likely to cope. And so my fear is that we leave people where they are and we don't find solutions to actually help them move out of harm's way.
Okay, Caroline Zickgraf joining us there from Brussels. Thanks so much.